seems that we need to talk about Jordan Peterson, because he's become quite popular among people in martial arts. Yeah, if you're clicking on this, if you clicked on this thinking you're looking at a BreadTube video and you're wondering what on earth you're doing on a martial arts channel, yeah, don't worry, this is going to be telling you about how awful Jordan Peterson is. I will also be mentioning a number of BreadTuber videos, so you should feel right at home. And in case you're wondering if martial arts is this hotbed of SJW activism that you never really heard about, no, it's not. It really isn't. There's a couple of women who do really push the feminist angle. There's a woman based in Hawaii, I think it's like a group called L Live Action. She makes a point of teaching in heels because, you know, it's very women's based self-defense, and women, well, they quite often wear heels, and, you know, if you're going to get attacked, the attacker isn't going to give you a chance to change from your heels into something more sensible looking. So you kind of have to learn to fight in what you're going to be attacked in, as a general rule. I mean, it's one of the reasons I wear heels in some of my videos, because, you know, I wear heels sometimes, and I like them. So, you know, kind of need to be able to fight in them, really. There's another woman, Fauzia Lala. She's a Muslim of Asian heritage, teaches in hijab, based in Seattle, I think, Washington State. Yeah, she very much pushes the intersectional angle a bit more. So yeah, there's them. There's some vegan guy. Yeah, but he's just about being vegan, really. He looks as though he's one of those new wave vegans who kind of think that being vegan is all that matters, really. Yeah, being a vegan really doesn't make you an SJW. My former teacher's ex-wife, for example, is a vegan. Couldn't call her an SJW in any way. Oh my goodness, no. I mean, yeah, she loves her dogs and everything. That doesn't make her one. And of course people love their dogs. Quite often they love their dogs more than they love their children. I'm sure she doesn't love her dogs more than she loves her children. No, definitely not more than one of them, anyway. I expect she just forgets to mention the other two, and it's got nothing to do with them being ginger and one of them being deaf. And she's not at all ashamed of having a disabled child. I'm sure that's the case. But anyway, yeah, there is a definite difference between the kind of a lot of the new wave vegans and, well, me, who's been a vegan for quite a long time. The new wave vegans seem to sort of feel like being vegan is the only thing that matters. I recently just stopped following the original Vegan Society, which has been around for decades, but yeah, I mean, the sort of tipping point came, I think, when they posted something about Nescafe vegan lattes. And yeah, the thing is, I've been boycotting Nestle products for over 20 years. I'm sure my daughter could tell you horrible stories of me refusing to buy her Nestle chocolate bars throughout her childhood. Yeah, it's, oh god, that's such a strange thing. I mean, back then, every vegan boycotted Nestle. If you'd said to them, "Hey, look, Nescafe are doing these vegan lattes," they said, "What the fuck's a latte?" Because actually we didn't have lattes back then. But then they said, "I don't care, I'm not buying that Nestle shit. It's Nestle. I don't care what vegan stuff they're doing. I don't buy Nestle." But yeah, there do seem to be a number of vegans out there who don't really, who think that ethical concerns stop at being vegan. I mean, what next? The Vegan Society going to tell us about all the vegan things you can get at McDonald's? honestly, I mean, last time I went into McDonald's, I was pregnant with my 24-year-old daughter. You do all sorts of crazy things when you're pregnant. I was looking around nervously, just hoping that nobody I knew would recognise me or see me or anything. And that was before I got into political activism. Yeah, I mean, and they kind of seem to think that, oh, it's just a bit hard, we just need to get people to be vegan and then go from there. But, and you know what, if you've got the time and the energy to get really angry with me and go on at me about suggesting that maybe plastic isn't a great replacement for leather, which it isn't, then you've kind of got the energy to think about other alternatives to leather than plastic and not have a go at me like I'm somehow being anti-vegan by suggesting that, you know, plastic isn't a great replacement for leather. Yeah, there is actually a pretty good video about this by Mexi. We'll leave a link for that in the description just so you can get a good idea of what I'm talking about, better idea. But yeah, being a vegan doesn't make you an SJW. Quite a lot of the bread tubers aren't vegan. And a lot of the vegans would kind of object to bread tubers and SJWs in general because a lot of them aren't vegan. But yeah, it's a bit of a funny thing. But with me, you get your full spectrum SJW stuff. Yeah, I don't just do the vegan thing, I do quite a lot of other stuff too. And that's why I'm talking about Jordan Peterson. You won't get any of the vegans caring about Jordan Peterson. Well, those new wave ones anyway. Okay, when I made my prequel kind of video, someone commented on it saying, "What's your bias? I need to know your bias. I can't debate you unless I know your bias. Tell me your bias, I need to know your bias." This here is a pretty good indication of my bias. Big fucking anarchy sign tattoo. Yeah, I'm an anarchist. What that means in this context in particular is that I don't like hierarchies. I think hierarchies are generally a pretty bad thing. They pretty much always involve some imbalance of power, some abuse of power, subjugation of people who, you know, nobody really should be subjugated. And they tend to be exploitative. Some people getting more than they need, other people not getting as much as they need, etc. etc. Jordan Peterson, on the other hand, loves hierarchies, and pretty much for the same reasons. Now, I've found it quite hard to understand Jordan Peterson. I've been watching videos of him, about him for about a year. I mean, not continuously, you know. Like, they come up on BreadChew every now and again, and I'm just like, what, another Jordan Peterson video? Really? Do I really have to? Oh, God. Okay, fine, I'll watch this bloody Jordan Peterson video. And, yeah, and I just keep watching and thinking, what? I don't get it. I don't get this. Like, I get what's wrong with him. I always got that. I just didn't understand him. I found it very hard to get a grip on him as a person. I had to watch an awful lot about him and an awful lot of him to really feel like I could understand what he was doing and what he was about. I would say the tipping point came when I watched a Russell Brand interview with him. Now, I would have preferred Russell Brand to kind of really have a bit more of a go at him, but it was pretty clear in the interview that Russell Brand had seen the Cathy Newman interview and decided that wasn't an approach that was going to work. And so instead he kind of really put Jordan Peterson at his ease. And to be fair to Russell Brand, if the problem of Jordan Peterson could be solved in one video, there wouldn't be all these videos about him. So I can't really, and you know, I did feel like I understood him a lot better as a result of that. So got to give him credit for that, really. But I guess that's partly why it's taken me so long to get round to even thinking about saying anything about him. I mean, I was quite aware, I don't know, after last year when I watched the first one by ContraPoints, that yeah, a number of the martial arts accounts that I follow are quite popular, were following Jordan Peterson. Now the thing is, I don't normally follow accounts on Instagram or Twitter that I don't like, that would, you know, post anything I don't like. I mean, there's one on Instagram I follow, just in a got my eye on you kind of way, but you know, that's unusual. I think it's a handy way of letting certain people know I was on Instagram. But otherwise I wouldn't normally, and you know, if they don't post stuff that I find really offensive, so I kind of let it go. But then one of these accounts with lots of followers posted a quote, an inspirational quote by Jordan Peterson. Now, it wasn't anything that I found offensive in and of itself. Thing is, Jordan Peterson says so many things, it's very possible to find a number of things that aren't very offensive and fit well into an inspirational, motivational martial arts post, really. So I can understand how that happened. You know, this is an account I quite like, don't agree with everything he posts, but you know, does make some attempts to point out the rubbishness of things like the belt system, kind of deal with toxic masculinity. I'm not sure if he thinks of it specifically as dealing with toxic masculinity, but it's kind of a thing he does. And but yeah, he was posting this, and it was just like, oh god, and like, this is a man who breeds toxic masculinity and breeds the kind of crappy attitudes that leads to the wrongness of the belt system, you know. So it's just like, it's kind of concerning. And now there's a difference, okay, between posting quotes by Jordan Peterson and maybe posting a quote by some old racist white philosopher like Kant, you know. Like, if you, I mean, you could quote Kant, right? But I'm sure you could find something in Kant's philosophy to inspire your martial arts followers. But the thing is, if you quote him, you think, oh, Kant, he looks kind of interesting. Well, yeah, it's quite hard to get much about him. I mean, Philosophy Tube will tell you about him in his videos, but he'll also tell you he's a racist and misogynist, and you shouldn't really listen to too much of what he says. And well, he'll be a bit more complex in his analysis, but anyway, yeah, or you'll find maybe some books by Kant which will be written in language from like 200 plus years ago that won't be very accessible today, and the academic books about him will be in academic language that won't be very accessible. The thing about Jordan Peterson though, there's like 3-hour interviews of him with Joe Rogan, loads more hours of interviews of him with Stefan Molyneux, and then he's got his own lectures and stuff, and it's just like, it's so easy to get hold of him. And rather like, you know, yeah, there's a video I watched by Mia Mulder where she talked about the language that he uses, and she like really points out that Jordan Peterson might be an academic and he can do the academic language, but he actually also is capable of talking in a very accessible way. And when he's on the Joe Rogan show, he sounds very accessible. Yeah, in this book, I mean, it's tedious as hell, this book, but you can understand it pretty well. It's not that difficult to understand. So, yeah, this is the problem with quoting Jordan Peterson. He's otherwise very accessible, and you know, quoting nice Jordan Peterson quotes lead to bad Jordan Peterson quotes, and they just lead into Jordan Peterson hell. You really shouldn't do it. It's not a good idea. Okay, so this is going to be a long video, okay, I admit that, but frankly, right, if you can watch 3 hours of him being interviewed by Joe Rogan, you can watch this. This isn't going to be 3 hours long. There's no point going all Colgon on me and claiming you can't watch a video for more than 5 minutes. Anyway, so, yeah. But I am going to have to not go too much into everything that he does, because that would just be going on forever. I did think I should really make the effort to watch loads and loads of videos about him. The thing is, there's just so many and they go so long, and I could watch them forever, but I can't renew this library book forever, so kind of have to get on with it really. And I'm going to try, so I'm going to just concentrate on some things that particularly bugged me and which don't seem to have been dealt with yet elsewhere. I'll have to skate over things like his bizarre takes on fairy tales. I do sort of wonder if they have different versions of the fairy tales I grew up with in Canada, because I just don't get what he's saying about them at all. Okay, so, yeah, I read this book, okay. Really tedious. When I wasn't shouting at it, it was so tedious. I was having a hard job not falling asleep. And yeah, the only way I managed to get through it in the end was by playing Eminem very loudly on repeat. Make of that what you will. And I think the first thing that I should really try and get home about this guy, that people seem to have missed, but is really, really important to bear in mind when you think about him. Right, he talks about himself in this book a lot. He talks about his childhood, he talks about his adult life, he talks about, his friends and his family and all this kind of stuff, right? I can't find anywhere in his background an I pulled myself up by my bootstraps and therefore you can too story. I mean, he is telling you, stand up straight with your shoulders back. Come on, bucko. I mean, he is basically telling you to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Now, he's never had to do that. He's never had to struggle for anything, as far as I can work out. The worst thing that happened to him in his childhood, the worst thing he had to deal with in his childhood, as far as I can tell, was the long, boring, cold, dark winters in small town Canada. That was all he really had to worry about. Yeah, he's got, there's no hint of him ever wanting for food or having to suffer the indignity of wearing his brother's hand-me-downs or anything. His parents stayed together throughout his childhood, and I guess they stayed together throughout his adult life too. And there's no hint of him ever having to struggle to pay for rent through university or anything. There's no, he never had to struggle to study, to find places to study or anything like that. He's never had to struggle for anything. He doesn't know what it's like to be the kid in the class that has free school meals. He doesn't know what it's like to, be at school with go to school in a school uniform, and everyone's supposed to have a school uniform, but yours is still somehow the shit school uniform, and everybody tells you about it. He doesn't know about having to go to a feed bank. He doesn't know about the long summer holidays of no money and starvation almost, having to go to clubs just to be able to eat. He doesn't know about working on a full-time, getting a full-time wage, but still being homeless because you can't afford rent. He doesn't know about that. He doesn't know about having to live with your parents because you just can't afford your own house. He doesn't know about any of that. He's never had to struggle for anything. And yet there he is telling you how to work your way up through the hierarchy. Well, he's never had to do that because he was just up there anyway. I think it's very important to bear that in mind when you think about him. Think about this advice that he's giving you. because he really doesn't know your struggles. He doesn't know what you have to deal with. He doesn't know what it's like to, you know, try and pass your high school exams when your parents are split up and they're at war, and you know you've had to move from one parent's house to another parent's house, and your father's not paying child support. He doesn't know what that's like. He doesn't know how that impact on your ability to just study and go to school and concentrate and stuff. I've got no clue about any of that, because he never had to deal with any of that. Okay, now, next thing, I know I did sort of talk about this bit in the prequel video, yin and yang. Well, mostly what I particularly want to talk about is his repeated claim that chaos is feminine. He keeps saying it, says it over and over again. Every time he mentions chaos, pretty much he says it's feminine. He doesn't give you any reason for saying that. He doesn't give you any source for it. He doesn't tell you where he got that from. And he says it so much that, you know, you might as well subtitle this book An Antidote to Women. Because, frankly, it's the way that he is associating chaos with femininity and women that it just turns it into this dog whistle niggling connection that you just assume that women are going to be chaotic and bringing chaos and stuff. It's really annoying. Now, the only thing that I'm aware of that he's mentioned that says that chaos is feminine. This is Talisker Sky, by the way. I know there's going to be a few people watching who'll be interested. Quite like an eye lane. Like a Speyside too, not really a fan of the Glens. Anyway, so here is what he keeps saying. He says that yin is chaos because it is feminine. Okay, so here's my book here, Dictionary of Symbolism, Cultural Icons and the Meanings Behind Them. It's a really fascinating read, like if you're a nerd. So, what does this book say about yin and yang? The ancient Chinese representation of cosmic duality. Yin symbolises femininity, the north, cold, shadow, earth, the passive, and dampness. North is often considered to be stronger than south, by the way. It's pretty much across the board. Just thought I'd throw that in there. Yang symbolises masculinity, the south, warmth, light, the heavens, the active, dryness, and the emperor. Although in the everyday life of ancient China the male was clearly dominant, the language did not reflect this by placing yang before yin, as one might expect. Always say yin-yang. Masculine dominance is, however, reflected in the predominantly negative associations of yin. In theory, the two principles are thought to be of equal rank. The visual representation is based on a circle, not snakes, like he says. The symbol of primal unity that preceded the polarity of yin and yang. This unity is a philosophical concept going back to Chu Xi, AD 1130 to 1200. The division into two poles is represented by the bisecting of a circle with an S-curve, not a snake. The yin half is dark, the yang light, half light. From this polarity comes from the creation of the five elements, and from their interaction, multifaceted richness of the world, the 10,000 things. Mutual dependence of yin and yang is expressed by a dark circular centre in the yang sector and a light one in the yin. This is to make it clear that light and shadow are not in conflict for the domination of the whole. They strive rather for completion in one another. In the diagrams of the I Ching, yin is expressed by a broken line, yang by a continuous line. Odd numbers are associated with yang, even with yin. In ancient cave temples there were yin and yang stones. The former needed to be kept moist, the latter dry. When rainfall was excessive, the yang stone, or in times of drought or heat, the yin stone, was whipped to awaken its powers, to restore the proper harmonic balance between the two principles. Okay. No mention of chaos in that, or order for that matter. Now, the thing is, he's got no source for saying that, as far as I can tell. It's definitely not come from yin and yang. I did see a Ed interview video about him where he about yin and yang, sorry, and it did say something about yang can go berserk, but yin will just be too solid and still, and the fact is that yang is not order, yin is not chaos. Yang can be chaotic, yin can be orderly, but there's a whole lot more to it than that. But yeah, Jordan Peterson kind of tries to make it far too simplistic, and his association of it with feminine, I don't get. There is no source for him for that, apart from his tiny misogynist mind. That's where it is. I can't see any reason for him to saying that, except for, like, he's a man, therefore he is orderly, and then women, they come around and they go around being upsetting and chaotic and stuff, and he finds that hard to deal with. It's the only thing. There is nowhere, as far as I can tell, that he has actual source for this, apart from his own head. Okay, now there's another bunch of stuff about, he talks about the fact that apparently we have 2 women ancestors to 1 male ancestor. And he says that this is because women have the choice. They make the choice to go for higher status men. Now, I don't know on what basis he is saying that. I don't even know if it's true that you do have double women ancestors to male ancestors. I did try looking it up, but every entry I found for it led back to Jordan Peterson, whether it's someone else talking about it or what. But it doesn't really matter if it's true. What really matters is that he's saying it and the basis on which he's saying it, and what he claims is the reason behind it, and whether or not the reasoning behind it is actually genuine. Now, when he says you've got 2 female ancestors to 1 male ancestor, he's not, talking about your grandfather shagging both your grandmothers. That's not what he's talking about. Kind of goes back further than that. But to be honest, right, I mean, you don't have to go back more than a few hundred years probably to have that happen, to have all that crossover. But it is quite common for men to procreate with more than 1 woman. I mean, go back to Solomon, for example. King Solomon, famous wise king of Israel. For some reason, Jordan Peterson's never mentioned him, as far as I can tell. He goes on about the Bible a lot, but I think it's kind of rather specific bits of the Bible. Never mentioned Solomon that I can recall, even though he's a wise king, and Jordan Peterson does go on about the wise king trope quite a lot. I'm not entirely sure why. But anyway, Solomon had 2,000 wives and concubines. Now, when I read the Bible when I was 9 or 10, I was thinking, blimey, you'd have to have sex like 3 times a day just to get through them all in a year. I mean, like, really? 2,000? And that's just one man. The Bible's really not appropriate reading material for children. Don't tell children to read the Bible, for goodness sake. And don't give them Bibles either. Really not appropriate. There's so much violence and sex in them, and God is pretty nasty in his behaviour, frankly. I think Gospels are alright. They seem to be pretty child friendly, and Jesus is okay. But anyway. So, So that's very easy for Solomon to have quite that. You know, if you just go by that one, you'd have like 2,000 female ancestors to one. Well, no, you wouldn't. But I mean, you know what I mean? It's quite. It would have to involve a lot of crossover down the centuries, but you know, it's quite easy for that to happen. You know, historically, men have tended to be sexually aggressive. I mean, you get more sexually aggressive ones, and you get some that aren't. And Jordan Peterson does talk about that a bit. I mean, he goes on about Genghis Khan. Says something about him being such a rampant rapist and womanizer that some very significant percentage of people in Asia today have some sort of genetic inheritance from him. I don't know how true that is. That could be a little bit apocryphal, but I can well believe that he was, you know, I'm sure he was a rampant rapist and womanizer. The thing is, though, that's not those women making the choice, is it? That's Genghis Khan forcing himself on all those women. You don't, and if you go to you look various histories, like in like Charles II, in this country, it's quite a running joke in political circles that the House of Lords, which is the upper lawmaking chamber in this country, is mostly populated by either the descendants of Charles II's mistresses or his drinking companions. He's known to have had about 50 mistresses or something. Do you think all those women were in a position to say no, felt in a position to say no? I mean, he could basically have had them executed if they said no to him. Do you think they could have said no? I'm not saying they didn't want him necessarily, but what if they didn't? And there's a famous diarist around that same time, Samuel Pepys, and he basically ran the Navy under Charles II. And his diary is just a litany of, you know, daily groping women in the backs of carriages and having affairs all over the place and getting women pregnant and then not wanting to know anymore once they've got pregnant. And yeah, I'm afraid that a lot of that is mostly about sexual aggression, and there's just as an example of the lack of autonomy that women have had historically. Mary, Queen of Scots, in the previous century, in the 1500s, she had a lot of trouble holding on to her throne, and after an incident, she ran off with some earl who was supposed to be helping her, and he raped her. Because he wanted to marry her, and then of course she married him because that's what you do when you're raped. But the thing is, you know, he was an earl and she was the queen, she was the monarch, and yet still he felt that he had rights over her body. And then there's Queen Elizabeth I, when she was a princess. After her father died, his surviving wife Catherine Parr remarried, and that man sexually abused Elizabeth when she was a teenager. And this was literally the sister of the monarch back then, but she was still sexually abused. Now, if you think, but famously she never married, and that may have been part of the reason that she never did. But I mean, you know, certainly she always felt like if she married, then whoever she married, whatever man she married, would be quite insistent that he was in charge, and she didn't want any man having control over her. Fair enough, really. But if you think about it, if women like that, women who were top monarchy, top royalty, were not in a position really to have bodily autonomy, well, what do you think women below them had? Do you really think they were making the choice? And the reason that we have 2 female ancestors to 1 male ancestor is because all those women were choosing higher status men? No, it's most likely the higher status men were raping them. That's what was most likely was happening. Now, he's just saying that to try and give you an excuse to blame women for the fact that you don't have a girlfriend. It's kind of what it is. And, you know, there's all sorts of reasons for women not wanting to be in relationships. It's not necessarily about you personally. There's a lot more single people around these days, and younger people tend to be single more because they just prefer their autonomy, basically, because being in a relationship can be... there's an awful lot of cultural expectations and demands and stuff, and it quite often doesn't work. I've certainly never found being in relationships work for me. So, you know, you should stop blaming, at the very least, you know, stop blaming the fact that women want higher status men because of ancestry. That's just a load of rubbish. Okay, now there's this thing where he talks about, he goes on a lot about individualism. We all have to be individuals. He complains a lot about trans people being a group, and once you say you're a trans person, you are subsumed with that group of trans people, and all trans people are the same because they're all part of that trans group, and it's rubbish. They're not. Most, you know, trans people are not all the same. He just can't tell the difference. That's what it is. But yeah, there's this kind of weird thing where he goes on about you all have to be individual, but you also all have to be part of a group, part of a tribe, because we're all tribal. And then we all have to be socialised to be part of that tribe. And one of his rules about do not let your child do something that would make you dislike them. Well, a lot of that is about wider cultural ideas. You know, he's not just saying don't let your child do things that you don't like. He's also saying don't let your child do things that other people don't like. Now, I mean, I was not properly socialised, I guess, because when I was a kid, I was always being told I was behaving far too much like a boy. I should behave like a proper girl. Why wasn't I behaving like a proper girl? I'm not a boy. So ridiculous. But it kind of doesn't allow for things like, you know, girls running around preferring to play it than preferring from playing mummies and daddies or something. You know, it's basically saying don't let your child be transgender, don't let your child be gay, because that's things that wider society doesn't like. But obviously it's not limited to that. There's all sorts of ways in which you can be individual which aren't anything to do with being LGBTQ or whatever. And he's basically saying, yeah, okay, you have to be an individual, but within very narrow parameters. But then he does also say you have to be part of a tribe. The reason for this is to be part of a tribe, so you can all stick together and be accepted as part of a tribe. It's very important. And it can't be too big, because if it's too big, then there's too much of a hierarchy to climb up. And then you all have to stick together so that you can fight against other tribes, or, you know, stand together against other tribes. Okay, so on the one hand he's saying be an individual, but within very prescribed parameters. And then he's saying don't be part of a tribe if it's trans people, but be part of this tribe, be part of your local culture. It's just like, it's basically, you know, be an individual, but the right kind of individual. Be part of a tribe, but the right kind of tribe. Don't let your individuality be subsumed as part of the tribe, but you do still have to be part of the tribe, so allow your, you know, it's all a bit circular and all a bit ridiculous. Okay, there's a couple of other things that I really want to talk about. So he has this thing about lefty commies in universities taking over the establishment with the subjects like women's studies and stuff like that. That's kind of ridiculous. I suppose I sort of feel like I shouldn't have to explain, but I'm going to, because I kind of am in a position to, really. I used to be involved in a lot of, direct action, radical activist stuff, most of the environmental stuff. Some of it was peace activism, a bit of animal rights activism, and it so happens that I live next to a Russell Group university, which is the equivalent of an Ivy League university in the US, and now is also a leading centre of climate change research. So you would think, wouldn't you, that those climate change researchers, they'd be all over our shit, yeah? They'd be looking at us, watching us, guiding us, helping us out, giving us information, giving us resources. No, they weren't. I don't think any of us even knew their names. Yeah, you get a few students come along, join in, stick around after they finished university, but honestly, really, it was just they weren't involved with us. That's for damn sure. And there was one lecturer who used to come along to used to be involved with me with some stuff. Mostly it's the peace activist stuff. But he tended to keep a really quite low profile. He didn't really want people at his university finding out. As one thing I did, one time I went to meet someone with him from another part of the country, and he's saying, "Oh, call me Phil. I don't want this person to know my name. A bit worried." Because he's really paranoid. He didn't want people knowing what he was up to. He didn't want his university knowing what he was up to. He didn't want to know his, his colleagues knowing what he was doing. And if that was the case, well, I mean, obviously they're not really involved with this lefty commie plot to take over the establishment, are they? They couldn't. Otherwise, he'd have been quite happy to tell them all about it. Maybe we'd have got more resources from them, more help generally, more guidance and stuff, but they weren't. And I'll tell you how much they're prepared to overthrow the establishment, right? A little while back, I was involved in some campaign against the local council because they were trying to introduce rules for the allotments that were very draconian, and a lot of people were really worried about them because they were worried they wouldn't be able to keep their allotments in a way that would be okay and they'd all get kicked off. And so I went round with a petition against the rules and I went around talking to all these people on the allotments, and not everyone signed, obviously. Most of them signed it, but I'll tell you who really wasn't ever going to sign. None of those academics signed, I tell you. I mean, of course some of the academics had allotments nearby. They didn't sign it. And a couple of them got quite angry with me about it, in fact. And that's how much they're desperate to throw the establishment over, okay? They won't even sign a poxy petition about allotment rules when the local council are trying to introduce allotment rules. So they don't even want to say anything to the council. And the reason is that they're not trying to take over the establishment. And the reason they're not trying to take over the establishment is that as far as they are concerned, they are the establishment. Yeah, you can always tell when you're talking to an academic. Like I said, I've lived next to this university for years, really, like 20 years. And yeah, I see people who work there every now and again. But you can always tell which ones are the academics who work there, because obviously there's a whole bunch of different jobs at the university. You can tell which ones are the academics just by talking to them. They don't have to tell you they are an academic. You can tell because they've got an attitude. So I do. It's kind of. And in some ways, it sort of seems really silly to be going into that because it should be obvious. But this is a man. This man does kind of go on about it. He's not the only one. Got like Brett Weinstein, numpty, as well. So then there was another thing that I really wanted to talk about was skateboarding. And there's this rule where he talks about skateboarding. He says do not bother boys when they are skateboarding. Now, he kind of assumed, or I sort of assumed, that what he meant there was that you should just let boys be boys. Boys being boys is good. Don't stop them from being boys. Boys should be boys and girls should be girls. That's what I thought. But no, it's not really the case. And there was a point when I was reading this book where I, for several pages, appeared to have been reading about kulaks in Soviet Russia. I was thinking, why am I reading about this? What's this about again? What rule is this again? Oh, it's the one about skateboarding. What the hell has Soviet Russia got to do with skateboarding? So I had to look back again and see where it came from. And turns out he thinks that if you don't let boys skateboard, it's because you're mollycoddling them, and that leads to communism. Okay, as it happens, my local council, around the time of the allotment rules, they were trying to ban skateboarding in various particular parts of the city centre. And was it because they were worried that boys were going to injure themselves while skateboarding around the city centre? Was it because of that? No, it wasn't. It's because they somehow got it into their heads that boys were skateboarding over the War Memorial, which I've never seen personally, but they reckoned they were. And it had to be stopped because they were damaging the War Memorial. I don't know, maybe one boy was skateboarding on, like there's various steps, there's various stages, maybe they were like skateboarding over the bottom step, which is basically level with the rest of the path, I don't know. But yeah, they were wanting to ban skateboarding, and yeah, they reckoned that they were damaging important and sacred parts of the city centre and not respecting the city centre with their skateboarding. That's what it was. And I actually went on a protest against this. Me, the commie agitator. I mean, okay, I am an anarchist, but I just know that Jordan Peterson cannot tell the difference between anarchists and communists. There's an awful lot of those people out there. This music stopped. It's quite irritating. I don't know quite why it does this. Yeah, so there was all this protest against it. Yeah, so think about it, right? I don't know, I might be stereotyping a bit here, but I reckon there's a few Jordan Peterson fans out there who have been skateboarding and have maybe been told to stop skateboarding. Has it ever been because someone was worried that you were going to injure yourself? Really? Has it? I don't think it normally is. As far as I can tell, usually when boys are told to stop skateboarding, it's because they're like making the place look untidy. Or, you know, people just don't like seeing people having fun. Certainly the local council are not communist. Let's be very clear about that. They're a bunch of petty authoritarians who just, you know, the council workers just get a real kick out of spending their working days ruining people's lives, making people miserable. The councillors, they all think they're like little kings or something. They've all just they just love having the power to just make people miserable and, you know, do things like stop boys from skateboarding. It's got nothing to do with mollycoddling. It's just abuse of power. I don't know why Jordan Peterson thinks that it's ever mollycoddling. I really don't. But he seems to think that. That's what it does seem like he's kind of really misinterpreting things there. Okay, so I guess we're going to have to talk about lobsters. Now, he in the first chapter talks about lobsters. Apparently, right, lobsters, male lobsters, they bite. And when one of them loses, it gets a kind of a loser lobster body and a loser lobster brain. And then the winning lobster gets a winning lobster body and a winning lobster brain. And the more the winning lobster wins, the more winning its body and brain becomes. And the more the loser lobster loses, the more loser-like the body becomes and the brain becomes. And therefore hierarchy is normal and we should all just accept it. Or something. I suspect that if you were to ask people who study lobster behaviour, they might just tell you that you can't really transpose lobster behaviour onto human behaviour automatically. Studying human behaviour and lobster behaviour are separate disciplines. People who study human behaviour are anthropologists, and they don't study lobsters in order to understand humans. They study humans in order to do that. Now, there is kind of a difference, I would say, between lobsters and humans, and that is that humans are more capable of development. I'm not saying lobsters aren't capable of development at all. Probably are. I don't really know much about lobsters, but humans, we are definitely capable of development. You are capable of development. We're all capable of it. Obviously, some of us kind of rather refuse to develop, but we're capable of it. We're capable of making a better society should we choose to. We're also capable of making things worse should we choose to. So that's one big difference to start with. But Jordan Peterson tells us that because he likes you to believe that hierarchy is inevitable. There's no way out of hierarchy. You're going to have hierarchy whatever happens, and therefore you've got to learn to work within a hierarchy. Now, my big problem with this book, with Jordan Peterson, right, is in this book, he's trying to tell you, it's you who I am pointing at, you. If you follow these 12 rules for life, you will make it up that hierarchy. Now, he does admit that, you know, since there's always going to be a hierarchy, because someone goes up, then another one goes down. But there's always going to be a hierarchy. But if you follow those rules, you'll make it up there. No, you won't. He's lying to you. It's bullshit. The reality is that the vast majority of people do not move from their socio-economic position. They don't go up. Social mobility has never been great. It's a lot worse now. Same goes for cis-het white males as it does for everyone else, I'm afraid. And the thing is that people like me, people who are LGBTQ+, people who are disabled, people of colour, women, we're all told that this is where we belong and that we can't get anywhere, we can't do better. We're all told that. But you're not, I mean, cis-het white males are not told that. Cis-het white males are generally told that they are better and that they can do better, that they're better than the rest of us. They're better than me. You're all told you're all better than me, I know that. So you're kind of invested in keeping this because you're being told that you can move up that hierarchy by Jordan Peterson. But I'm going to tell you something about Jordan Peterson, okay? I'll tell you something about him that no one on BreadTube has actually said. Thought Slime spent several minutes not saying it. I'm going to say it. Jordan Peterson is a mediocre man. Jordan Peterson is a mediocre white man. Jordan Peterson is a mediocre, white, cisgender, heterosexual man. And the reason that he got through his life the way he did, the reason he got to be a college professor, is that he ticks all of those boxes, plus a whole lot more. A whole lot more that most cis-het white men will never tick. Because you haven't lived his life. Most of you men who are watching, you haven't lived his life. You haven't been around the people that he's been around. You don't know you haven't picked up on all those little cues. Maybe there's like some specific way you wear a tie that he hangs around knows that you just don't know because you'll never know because you've never been in the right place and you just automatically pick on those things. Yeah, the reality is that Jordan Peterson is in the position that he's in because he ticks a whole load of boxes plus a bunch more that you will never tick. And it won't matter if you are a cisgender heterosexual white male watching, okay? The likelihood is you will be of lower socioeconomic status than Jordan Peterson. You have always been that, and you will always be that. And it won't matter how hard you work, it won't matter how well you get qualified or anything like that. You still won't ever get to Jordan Peterson's position. It won't matter if you're actually better qualified than him. You still won't get it because you don't tick the right boxes. The vast majority of these men that Jordan Peterson is helping just don't tick the right boxes. They don't tick the boxes that he ticks. And, and he doesn't want you taking his place. He doesn't want anyone else taking his place. He wants to stay where he is in that hierarchy. Thank you very much. He's quite happy there. And people who are higher up like that, they have all sorts of little ways of making sure that people lower down stay there. And it doesn't really matter whether it's deserved or not, they'll still make sure you stay there because they don't want to lose their place in the hierarchy. Jordan Peterson is so invested in this whole hierarchy thing because it's really benefited him very well, and it always has. He's always done well out of it. And he's trying to convince you, well, all of us really, because he wants to stay there. He wants to stay in his place. He wants you to think that you can do better because that way you'll be invested in keeping that there. But by thinking that you can do better, by buying into his rules and stuff, by buying into his thinking, you're keeping him there, you're keeping him in his position, but you won't, a position that you are probably never going to be able to get to. And on some level, Jordan Peterson knows that. I'm sure he knows on some level that he's actually a mediocre man. But he obviously won't admit that. And the reality almost certainly is that there'll be a black trans woman out there who would do his job better than him. but won't get it because they don't tick all the privilege boxes that he ticks. And it's not just about being a black trans woman either. There'll be a whole bunch of other boxes that a black trans woman would never tick. Just like you. And like I said earlier on, he's never had to struggle for his position. He was just there in the first place. He never had to work for his position. If you want his position, the reality is you're probably going to have to work for it, and it probably doesn't matter how hard you work for it, you still won't get it. And it's like Philosophy Tube said in his video, he's a snake oil salesman. He's lying to you. And he'd probably tell you that I'm a snake. Snakes are actually pretty cool, to be honest with you. They have a bad reputation, but it's mostly undeserved. And actually, in a lot of cultures, snakes are pretty well revered. Certainly in martial arts, they're pretty well thought of. So, I think the next thing I want to talk about is his famous stand against being forced to address transgender and non-binary people appropriately. Because apparently this is a terrible infringement of his civil rights. Okay. So I did watch this video of him with Brett Weinstein and Joe Rogan. God, I don't know how many people, who really does think watching 3 50-year-old men in their 50s is just boring on, it's great. I just, honestly. But anyway, there are, Brett Weinstein's another person who's been stirring up rubbish, pretend racial hatred. Well, he's pretend whites racial hatred, if you see what I mean. But it's really funny seeing the quotes, the comments in the video, underneath the video on YouTube. They're all saying, "Oh, you like Rosa Parks standing up for civil rights." Okay, let's think about what Rosa Parks did, shall we? Rosa Parks deliberately and with forethought sat in a designated whites-only section while black, knowing that she would be arrested for it, possibly imprisoned, and she was arrested for it. And she did that as a protest against her daily life being infringed, because she didn't have the rights that other people had, that white people had, just because of the colour of her skin. You know, she couldn't even sit on a bus that other people could sit on just because of the colour of her skin. It was ridiculous. And she got arrested for it. And that was a protest. That was her making a stand, okay? That was what Rosa Parks did. So, how many times has Jordan Peterson been arrested for deliberately misgendering a trans or non-binary person? How many times do you reckon? I'll tell you how many times. It's a nice round number. 0. Zilch. Nada. It has not happened. Now, why is it that it hasn't happened? Has he failed to come across transgender and non-binary people in his daily life? Oh, yeah, it's possible. I don't see transgender and non-binary people in my daily life. I see them from occasionally, but it's not a daily thing. So it's possible. In which case, it's not that big an infringement on his daily life, that's for damn sure. But if he were really making a stand, if he were really keen to make a point of how ridiculous this law was, he would be finding those transgender people and misgendering them to their faces. and then getting arrested for it. That's what would be happening. But it hasn't happened. Why is he? Where are these? He's got all this stuff of him on YouTube. Where's the YouTube video of him, like, at a pride march, deliberately misgendering people to their faces? Has he done that? I haven't seen any of this. Now, you could say, yeah, well, you put yourself at risk, and who wants to get arrested? You could get attacked and be arrested with shit, and what have you ever done? Well, this is really not something I have to justify to you, but I can, so I will. I've actually been arrested numerous times for protesting against something that I considered wrong and unjust. Mostly anti-nuclear stuff, it's been. Blockading various bases where either nuclear weapons were being held or maintained or whatever. A couple of times it was for aggravated trespass in military air bases that were being used by the US Air Force. And that was in 2003, in the run up to the invasion of Iraq. One of them I did actually get a prison sentence for. 3-month prison sentence I was given for it. I didn't actually serve those 3 months. I got that 3 months with a year's conditional discharge, which meant that if I did anything else bad within a year, then I would have to serve that 3-month sentence on top of whatever else I was given for the other bad thing that I did. I was not caught doing anything bad within a year, so I never served that sentence. However, when I cycled into that airbase, I did and sat on that taxiway, locked on, I knew that a prison sentence was a possibility. If you're wondering how you cycle into an airbase, right, you get some other people to cut a massive hole, and then you cycle because that gets you a bit further than just running. So I do know what it means to take a stand, okay, go out of your way to protest. Oh, and then there was that little incident where I painted the rules of the Chorleyfoot Code of Conduct on the windows of my former teacher's school and was arrested for that. But to be honest with you, when you've sat on a runway and had some angry soldier carrying a gun shouting at you, graffitiing a martial arts school, it's not that big a deal. So anyway, I know what it is to take a stand. I've taken the hits for that. I probably would take them again. What's Jordan Peterson ever done? What's he ever taken for? I'm sure I will get loads of people. Oh, well, he's had loads of death threats from trans people or something. I don't know. That I'm afraid that this famous stand that Jordan Peterson has taken doesn't seem like a big deal to me. No, I mean, it could be that there's maybe another reason why he's never actually been arrested for deliberately misgendering a trans or non-binary person. And maybe that's because it was never going to happen. It was never the intention of the bill or, the intention of anyone concerned that someone should be arrested for deliberately misgendering a trans or non-binary person on its own. As far as I can gather, the bill is mostly about a kind of a range of discriminatory behaviours, of which misgendering people is one. There are many ways you can discriminate against trans and non-binary people without misgendering them, I have to say. You can ascribe someone their correct gender but still be discriminated against them. Just point that out. But it has to be part of a pattern. You wouldn't get arrested for it once. And Jordan Peterson's panic about that and his raising the panic about that is really, it's because, you know, he's worried about, you know, that black trans woman who might actually take his job because they'll be better than him. That's why. He's just shit staring. And he's staring a whole bunch of other people up too, because I don't know, I guess they're worried that maybe someone will notice they're not as great as they've always been told they are. And that really, us women, disabled, LGBTQ plus people, people of colour, we're all just as good as you in probably pretty much any context. Okay, so you're probably thinking that, oh well, maybe you're not. But anyway, even if you're not, if you're thinking, oh my god, I can't look to Jordan Peterson for guidance now, where am I going to go for guidance on how to make my way in this world? Well, there are plenty of places really. I would suggest you try reading a book called Amateur, A True Story of What Makes a Man by Thomas Page McBee. I'll leave a link for it for Amazon in the description. It's a book by a transgender man who got into boxing as a way of working through his transition to manhood. And I've heard an abridged version of it on Radio 4. I've heard about it from other people. I follow him on Instagram. Yeah, he does go quite a lot into like what masculinity really is, how it all works within wider society and stuff like that. And I think if you're feeling a little bit like you can't work out your place in the world or something, you'll find that would be a better guide, really. Yeah, he talks about the mistakes he makes and being like quite sexist himself once he's, you know, transitioned to manhood, even though brought up as female, that kind of thing. So yeah, I guess he kind of has a unique perspective, well, not that unique, but you know, an unusual perspective on it that could be quite helpful. Another book I would suggest you try reading is The Conquest of Bread by Peter Kropotkin. Kropotkin, spelled Kropotkin. And yeah, that might help you a little bit to think beyond hierarchy. Because, you know, Jordan Peterson, when you think about all that stuff that Jordan Peterson's telling you, you're not thinking about alternatives, you're not thinking about how you can develop. And, well, he doesn't want you to think about alternatives. So, you know, try looking into alternatives to this hierarchical world that Jordan Peterson says must exist and will always exist and has always existed. Because it's not necessarily the case. Okay, so until the next exciting instalment of let's see what anarchist propaganda and personal politics I can shoehorn into a video regardless of the subject.